Hey guys, welcome to the fourth edition of Product Hackers, which is awesome. We've been doing really well with getting a good amount of attendees coming. Numbers are coming up. We're getting really good speakers, just like we do today. A little bit of shameless promoting, like I always do. All Squares, we're a recruitment company. Come have a chat if you're in the product space. If you're in delivery, if you're in engineering, we're always here. We got roles going, but yeah, today we're going to bring you the fourth edition with Seb to kick things off.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, and other than that, Sammy is also obviously massively passionate about product management. He actually came up with today's topic, which is a really good one, actually. What is product led, or what does that even mean? And we've got some amazing speakers in Stefan, Tobias, and Hillary who'll be joining us for the panel to talk about some of their war stories. You know, part of the reason that we have this webcast is obviously, I think, you know, especially during lockdown, one of the people that lives on my street works for NAB, and she told me that NAB did some analytics on people and how much more time they're spending logged on. And apparently it's like 45% more time each day they're logged on. You know, the time that they used to commute, they're now logging on and working. The time they used to commute back home, they're logging on and working. They check email at night, you know, they're on Slack all day, all those sorts of things. And I feel as though like this, you know, we obviously started this to make sure we learn from each other. We can share experiences, learn from some of the best across Australia and Melbourne. But also I think during this, you know, this time that we're in, it's really important to take that hour out. Even, you know, it's Friday, 1 o'clock. Might feel like everything's urgent, but like if you take this 1 hour out and learn from this 1 hour, I think there's so much that you'll take away from it. So we're going to keep going and doing this every second Friday, same time. So I would encourage you just to block your calendar out, and you can learn from some really cool people, such as today. So today's topic is about product led. I was trying to think about this and think about, you know, what product led means to me. And all I could think about really was that I feel as though product led, product managers are typically product led, like, you know, they're product managers, and they sometimes don't even realize that they're in a sales led organization. And as a result, and I know I've made this mistake many times, you are suggesting things that are very innate to you as a product manager, like let's offer this 7 days free and then sell them up. And you know, for a sales-led organization, for example, they don't really, like, they don't understand your perspective. And I think that has led to some super dark days. I know for me personally, definitely, and I'm sure it's led to some super dark days for a lot of product managers. And actually today's talks are, you know, going to tell us some really good war stories and what these guys learned from different organizations. So I'm really looking forward to learning from other people and understanding how dark their days were. And we'll start off with Stefan. And he is not only like an entrepreneur, but he's worked at Citrix, at LinkedIn, currently head of product at FIPA, and he's got an amazing story. So I'm gonna not take any more of your time and hand it over to Stefan. Over to you, mate.
All right. Thanks, Sev. Thanks, Sammy. Thanks, everyone from All Squares. I'm going to share my screen. And as we know, today's topic is, what does it mean to be product-led? So this is a great topic. I think the war stories is a great analogy for sure. There's definitely some war stories we all have, and I will definitely be sharing some today as well. I think to start off, what I'd love to do is talk about, you know, what a product-led organization does not look like. And I'm going to talk about one of those companies that Sav mentioned, It's the company that I used to work at that got lost. It used to be product led, and it just turned into something else entirely. So I'll talk a little bit about what went wrong. And at the very end, most importantly, I'll talk about how to stay product led. If you are a product led organization, how to stay that way. Company in question is, in fact, Citrix. So I'm not sure how many on the line have heard of Citrix. It used to be kind of a household name. I'm not sure how much of it is anymore. But Citrix was born out of a company called Expert City, which was founded by a gentleman named Klaus Schauser in Santa Barbara, California, way back in 1997. That's this happy looking gentleman right here. And Klaus was a leading proponent of the lean startup movement. So for those of you, hopefully many of you have read The Lean Startup and The Innovator's Dilemma by the late Clayton Christensen. Klaus was a leading proponent and also consultant on these books that have really become, the Bible for product managers worldwide. And Klaus developed a culture of innovation at Expert City and testing and learning. And that model of feedback-driven validation that's still with us today. And it paid off. In 2003, Citrix acquired Expert City. So great, happy, fun, $250 million payday for Expert City. And 1 year later, GoToMeeting, the flagship product that was developed, was launched. Now, GoToMeeting basically changed everything. This was in 2004, and this was a massive success at the time. I mean, this was remote working before it became cool. There's no other way to put it. This was literally 15, 17 years ago almost. And this is us at Citrix. That's me on my old balcony doing some sort of yoga pose while attending a meeting. I don't really know what that's all about. But we routinely worked from home, worked remotely, worked from Hawaii. We were an innovative product-led company for a while. And the reason I'm bringing this company up today is because we could have been, GoToMeeting's still around, Citrix is still around, but we really could have been one of the most impactful, important companies of the past, of this era. And right now, Citrix is kind of like a 7th or 8th place afterthought. We're not using Citrix right now. We're using Zoom. Zoom is a verb, for crying out loud, right? So, what happened? Well, the goal with any, innovative-led company is to keep that innovation going and create a perpetual innovation machine. We all know the typical product life cycle. You have your growth, you have your plateau, and then you have your decline. And, every product has this life cycle, and the goal is to use your growth to fuel your next innovation so that you can stay ahead of the curve. And it's counterintuitive because we all know that when things are going well and things are working, a company's natural inclination is to keep doing what's working. But this is exactly the moment in time that you need to disrupt yourself before someone else disrupts you. And if you do this right, by the time your growth starts to plateau, and it will because it always does, you have a new batter ready to go in the batter's box. Potentially that batter is a home run hitter. So what actually happened? Well, first and foremost, GoToMeeting started taking off and sales and marketing just doubled, right? It happened really quickly. And again, that's the natural inclination, is to keep doing what's working. But we essentially turned into a marketing and sales-led company, and that came with a cost. That extra investment in sales and marketing that had to come from somewhere. It came from growth. It also came from product and engineering. And we created spin-offs that were marketing-driven, not product-driven. We created a product called GoToWebinar and GoToTraining. GoToWebinar was basically the exact same thing as GoToMeeting, except the number of attendees went up from 15 to 250. And we changed the little orange snowflake here blue. I can't even remember what GoToTraining did. It didn't work, and we basically dialed back on it. All of those profits were reinvested in sales and marketing, and a company like that doesn't have the capacity to innovate anymore. We'd start doing things like easy spin-offs and marketing-driven product launches as opposed to true product launches. And we basically created not an innovation machine, but a marketing engine that you feed it $1 and it's designed to spit out $1.40 or $1.35. But the biggest thing we stopped doing is we stopped listening. We stopped listening to customers. We pretended that we knew what was best and that we were the ones in charge, when really it's the customers that are really the ones in charge. And it's a shame we stopped listening, because the customers were saying some pretty important stuff. They were saying, look, your product is great, but it's too slow. It's choppy. It crashes. I sound like a robot. And we didn't really listen. This feedback should have driven the roadmap and driven company decisions, but it wasn't. And you know who was listening was our competitors. They were listening, and they were sneaking up on us with faster, cleaner experiences and better built products that were priced even lower. So the marketing engine that you create, that it works until it doesn't. Eventually you run out of fuel. And in our case, those marketing campaigns went from bringing in $1.40 to $1.35 to $1.25 to $1.15, and customer acquisition went through the roof. Sales started struggling to sell. The company didn't really know what to do at that point except throw even more money at sales and marketing. And from a product standpoint, all efforts went from revenue generation to revenue retention. I remember one story in particular, talk about a war story. I was asked at one point to find ways to make it tougher for customers to cancel. Like, find ways to physically use darkish patterns and other methods to make it more difficult for customers to leave GoToMeeting, to leave Citrix. That is not the kind of product management you want to be doing. It's not fun at all. And this is the classic innovator's dilemma. It's by the time you get to this point, you're running scared. You're scrambling to keep up, and you're by this time it's too late. This is the classic innovator's dilemma. That's what happened to Citrix. So how do we prevent this from happening? How do you stay product-led, especially when you've always been product-led to begin with? How do you prevent yourself from losing it? Number one is always be listening. In sales, they teach you always be closing. In product, it's always be listening. And not only because customers will tell you what's wrong with the product, but because as a product leader, you actually want to be optimizing for your aha moments, right? You can't create innovation from thin air, but you can create the conditions for the ideas to occur. The gentleman I referenced earlier, Klaus Schauser, so he actually, after Citrix, he went on to found a company called Appfolio. That company used the same lean startup innovators dilemma methodology that he helped forward and spearhead. And they actually went public a few years ago, and it's a fantastic company. Definitely look into them if you haven't heard of them. Those product managers at Appfolio, they talk to at least one customer every single day, without question, part of the job description. Before your morning coffee, you're on the phone talking to customers. And that's how you should be doing product management. It's what I'm striving to do at Flippa. It's not easy, but it's definitely worth it. Number two is test your crazy ideas and test them as much as you can. You want to find the simplest, easiest way you can to test concepts without building anything, without writing a line of code. If it doesn't have, a lot of this comes from user testing, but it actually doesn't even have to be that structured. It can just come from a phone call. If you're on the phone with customers every day and you have a new idea for a feature, toss it over the fence and see what comes back. See how they react. It doesn't have to be this big, huge effort. Number three is tough. It's use data to prove your value. Look, we all know that money talks, right? But it's a lot easier for sales and marketing teams to show that they're bringing in revenue and they're bringing in value. If a company is spending $100,000 on a new salesperson, it's because they know that salesperson is going to bring in $140,000. Marketing campaigns are similar, right? We know that $1 will give us $1.30 or what have you. But with product, it's trickier. It doesn't work like that. You have to do a lot more work to calculate and prove that the feature or workflow that you released had a net positive impact. But that's exactly why it's so important, because management isn't going to see it on its own. It's on you to do the hard work and prove that your team is adding value, so eventually you can grow your team. And last but not least is create a culture of innovation. as product leaders, you have to expand your research. You've got to figure out how you can increase the collection of that feedback. And it doesn't have to fall all on your team. Work with other teams at your company to professionalize and gather that feedback. I'm talking design, I'm talking sales, customer success. These teams are on the front lines. They hear it all from the customers. They hear what's working, they hear what's not working. Get them on your side. Get them to understand how to help vocalize and synthesize that feedback, because there's nothing more important at a company than understanding your customers. And it doesn't have to stay within product management. As product leaders, your job is to create that culture of innovation where the learning and the ideas are baked into the product and into the company decisions. And if you do that, you can stay ahead of the curve and avoid that dreaded innovator's dilemma. So that's it. If you have any questions, would love to, if you could ask them in the Q&A session later. Really look forward to that. And if you'd love to find me online, I'm literally the only person named Stefan von Imhoff in the whole world. So shouldn't be too tough. Thank you.
Thanks, Stefan. I love the ABCs. Always be closing, but it's ABL for product managers. Awesome. Love it. All right, cool. As Stefan said, please feel free to ask your questions in the chat or in the Q&A. I've got a heap of questions for you as well, but I'll wait till the end. Next, we've got Tobias, and he's got a really interesting topic as well on how he fought a sales-led organization and lost. He's got a great background from Apple, Samsung, a bunch of other organizations. He's currently at Hydro, Tasmania. I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say. I think you're on mute, so if you jump off mute and put your camera on,
yeah,
ready to go.
Won't let me turn on my own camera, but we'll see. Won't get the permission. There we go. All right.
Perfect.
Let's do this. All right, can you guys see the screen now? So good?
Sure
Great.
can, mate.
Perfect. Yeah, so I think you put it well. I think there's a lot of things you can learn from war stories. So this is one of my favorite war stories about the title. You can see how I fought the sales, or how we fought the sales-led organization and lost. Now, I actually wrote the title though before I wrote the content, so hopefully it will all hold together. It might not, but I guess we'll find out. So anyway. But what it's really about is what you can do in a sales-led organization and how you can use product-led habits to, if you want to try to influence change. And in this scenario, it was an especially hierarchical organization that I was working in. But there's essentially two things I wanted you to take away from this. Let's see if I can get that working. There we go. The first thing is that you don't actually have to be in a product-led organization to benefit from using product-led habits. And the second thing is that if you want to try to influence change, it takes time, because change is about, if we're talking about change and transformation, it's about culture, and culture is about people. And people don't generally want to change behavior. So the feedback loop for that transformation is really, really long, and it's really frustrating. But if you can get to the end of that feedback loop, it can be also really invigorating. So hopefully there will be a little bit of hope to this story by the end. So a little bit of context. First of all, I was working on what I would consider to be a very balanced product team. It was a product manager or product owner, that was me. We had a really good UX designer and brilliant engineers. The company, we also had a lot of the supporting function around in terms of solution architect, great business analyst, QA team, and DevOps. So it really had everything that we needed to successfully build and launch a software product. The business was a global software company. They've been around for quite a few decades, and they launched their first version of the product in the mid-80s. It was, for a long time, it was distributed on CDs and DVDs to their customers. You could download it from their website now, but they still also like to ship around USB sticks to the customers. And the product itself was a workflow automation product. So it helped our customers with critical parts by, as it says, automating a lot of hard, expensive and tedious tasks. And because it was a fairly hierarchical and what I would consider a sales-led organization, the leadership team had also set a number of goals for us that we were meant to achieve. So first of all, we had the business goal. The business goal was more or less a 4-year sales target. I was literally handed the P&L for the product, which had the forecast broken down by month for 4 years. It also had the cost of developing the product for the first 2 years, because after 2 years, the product was intended to build to completion. The product goal that was set was, well, we have this legacy desktop product, but we really want a product in the cloud. And finally, the technology goal was, well, we also want, while we do this, we want to create the foundation so that we can move our desktop features to the cloud in the future. So we had the team, small, and actually an independent product team. So, we had lean practices, we could build quickly, we could iterate, but we also had to balance that against this sales-led and hierarchical organization with a very top-down decision-making. And that led us to being a very disempowered product team. And we felt like we missed this element of trust from the executives. And some of you might recognize this diagram. This is John Cutler's trust diagram. And I think it visually just shows you the importance of having trust in your product team, whether you want to take the long route or the short one. But we thought we could actually change that. We were hoping that, by being product-led, we could change that perception. So, and there were a few circumstances that we could use to our advantage. And one of them was that we were building the business first cloud-native app. And because of that, we also knew that we were going to have to do things a little bit differently and break down some of the old ways of working. But before we got into working, we really knew that we wanted to really understand what we wanted to do. And that takes us into the first product-led habit that I want to talk about, and that is about setting clear goals. Because I think that's one of the things that good product-led teams do. So you need to have something that is clear, easily understood, and that you can put measurable outcomes to as well. It didn't mean that these sales-led targets went away, but at least it gave us, what we needed to focus on the delivery. So in terms of reframing them, we looked at the business goal and this 4-year sales target that we were given. And because we already had existing products, this was only a part of that workflow that we were building. We know that this was needed to be sold as an add-on to our existing products. So we know it wasn't a product that was going to live solely in isolation. When we started looking closer at the product goals, we quite soon found that for our area and the problems we were set up to solve, there were quite a bit of competition in the market. And they were these small, nimble startups. So we know that, for us to succeed, we need to build something that is really easy to use. And as a differentiator to all of those, it needs to work really well and be integrated with our desktop product and desktop experience as well. So the technology goals, those we thought we could actually help the company achieve just through using good, modern software development practices like test-driven development. We chose to use an API-first approach as well, because we were integrating with the desktop products and working with the other product teams, and just enabling the engineers to work and do continuous integration. So with all that clear, we do the second thing that good product-led teams go, and that is to go out and get close to your customers. And this was pretty easy for us because we already had a big existing customer base. And we quite soon when we started talking to them, found out that they were actually really enthusiastic and engaged in the problem that we were set up to solve. Because it would really help them make their workflow so much smoother. So we also looked at a lot of our competitors. And one thing that we did that was really good, we believed at the time, that helped us a lot, was we did user testing for our product using the competitor's product. And if you wonder how that works, is what we did was essentially we signed up for accounts for a competitor's products and then set up remote user testing on a platform like usertesting.com. And then you can just sit back and you can see where your customers struggle or where they think, you know, their competitors' products are working really well. Other techniques that we used in this to be close to our customers, we used some like lean product development surveys, like the opportunity versus satisfaction, because we really wanted to narrow in on those areas where there was a high importance, but not necessarily very high level of satisfaction. We prototyped a lot, starting with paper prototypes, so low fidelity prototypes, to high fidelity prototypes in terms of full mockups. And things were going really well. The development progressed well. We tested frequently with our users. We ran internal sprint demos. We invited our senior stakeholders to observe and to participate as well. There were, of course, you know, the normal challenges in terms of managing scope creep. And there was also a big element of scope directive, I would call it. So not much of a choice, but this is scope that needed to change, or this was scope that needed to be included that came from the leadership team. But we were still confident that, you know, our product market fit was good. And when it came to our closed beta test for the product, the slots that we had available, we filled them within 24 hours. And the feedback that we got during that beta period was, you know, surprisingly positive and or I would even say overwhelmingly positive. And we worked hard to resolve all of the bugs that were reported. And at the end of the beta period, we could confidently recommend that the product was ready for launch. And we thought that was good, but we then got another scope directive. And that was that the leadership team wanted to add a credit card to the sign-up process. So we would be giving a free trial, but in order to access that free trial, you as a customer would have to give us your credit card details. We had a pretty strong opinion about this on the product team because we wanted to be product-led. And we wanted the growth to be product-led, which meant that, you know, we want to use the product as the primary vehicle. So our hypothesis was that if we let our customers get the chance to experience the product and we make that as easy as possible for them to do, then these customers are going to convert at a much higher rate than if they have to give up something that is valuable to them, like a credit card, before they even get a taste of it. So our market data and our best practice findings were pretty quickly dismissed. And I think I like this cartoon. It kind of like paints a good picture of how you feel that moment when you get a certain directive that you necessarily don't agree with. But some of the reasons why they insisted on having this credit card was because they thought that it was not a barrier. They thought we're a well-known brand, so customers don't have a problem providing us with their credit card details. They trust us. The other thing was that, you know, we don't want people just fishing around. We want the committed buyers. So, and therefore we'll get a better conversion rate if we already wean out all of those tire kickers. And there was also a bit of risk aversion from the leadership team. There was a sense that, you know, if we provide a free trial, customers are never going to convert. They will just create an infinite loop of free trial accounts and use our product free forever. But without actual numbers on this from our user base, the discussion was, you know, very much a hippo discussion with the highest paid opinion. So we decided that, well, the only thing that we can potentially convince them was to lead with the data, and that takes us into the product-led habit number 3. So while we were putting the credit card in place for the sign-up, we also instrumented the product to make sure that we could collect details on every step of that sign-up funnel. We also automated and followed up for anyone that signed up or didn't complete their sign-up with a survey to really understand and get some more information on the reasons behind that. And about a month later, after the launch, we thought we had a pretty compelling case. So we took this data to our leadership team in the company, and that meeting sucked. Now I'm a few years away from this experience, and I've done a lot of reflection on what happened, and I have a pretty good idea why it went the way it did. And I'll get to that in a moment. But first, I want to show you what it was that we actually presented in that meeting. So these are actual artifacts from that meeting. First of all, we looked at the sign-up funnel. Now, we could see that there were 3 points that had a pretty big impact on the experience. And we wanted to focus in on that experience in the middle between providing some details about where you work to actually giving us your payment details. So we had a drop of 60% of the users at that step. When we asked the users that didn't complete the sign up why they didn't do it, an overwhelming part of them say that I prefer not to give my credit card details before I try the product. It was up to 56% of the users. And we also did a bit of what's called looking at, so what's the opportunity value here? What would happen if we actually removed their credit card from the sign up? And we presented that opportunity value. We wanted to be as transparent as possible about the detail, the information that we gave them. And it equaled out at the end that we would get a monthly revenue uplift of around 81%. So massive opportunity. We thought this is a clear shot case. There's no way they're not going to confirm this. And then this is pretty much the response that we got. No, not so fast. We also have to take into my account my extensive marketing experience selectively ignoring data like this. So we were dumbfounded, right? But what was it that had actually happened, and why did we fail? I think it was a large part of that was my failure. I went in cold to that meeting. I had not primed my stakeholders enough before I went into that meeting and actually giving them a chance to react individually to the data that we had collected. And the leadership team in this organization also saw themselves as really great product visionary leaders. So, and I think Marty Kagan wrote a good thing in his book, Inspired, about how do you work with those kind of leaders, is that it takes a very special person that's not only a strong product visionary leader, but also has the ability and the willingness to convince them that it was all their idea from the beginning. But here I was in that room, literally just throwing this new data right in their face, which was not appreciated. But it was really sad, to be honest. And I think after this, the team was felt very discouraged. A few people had had enough. We had our lead engineer left the team, a designer left as well. I did a lot of thinking about my future at the company. And I kept having this Ken Norton tweet playing at the back of my head where he once said, I think it was Ken Norton that said this, was, if you can't do good product work at your company, then you should leave. And that's the conclusion that I eventually got to, was that, well, no, I don't feel like I can do that here. So I'm going to go and find something else to do. But a few others stayed around and we kept in touch, and we still do to this day. And I think this was where I was going to stop when I first wrote this talk. But I was actually contacted by one of my colleagues who had stuck around a while after I left. And he sent me this screenshot. So it's a Confluence screenshot, right? And the heading of it says, remove credit card details from signups. And then under the objective was identified from funnel of user engagement. And I was actually elated because I thought we had completely failed. I thought that all that effort we had put in around trying to introduce product-led habits had all been in vain. So this was actually still a small win for the team. Now, I don't think we were given the opportunity to become that empowered product team though. And I think that's a differentiator that these good product-led companies do, is that they make sure they allow their team to not only be close to their customers, but they also give them the trust to solve those customer problems that they find in ways that are valuable for the business. But now if you like me and you want to challenge, you want to try to influence change, I just want to leave you with this one thought, and that is, it is really hard, and there's definitely no guarantees that it's going to succeed. But I strongly believe that if you apply these habits, you can plant little seeds. And hopefully with time, these little seedlings will grow. And that's how you can influence change from within. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. That was really good. I feel like I used to play cricket as a kid, not very well, but it taught me one good thing, and that's patience. And I think that, a lot of what you're talking about, especially in the transformation side, it just requires a hell of a lot of patience and, resilience as well. Make sure that you just, you take the punches, but then you know how to recover and just continue to chip away. It's always difficult. Yeah. Thanks for that. We've also got Hillary joining us now, and Hillary's works at Black AI, right? Yeah. Yep. Thanks, Hillary, for joining us as well. We've got a bunch of questions which are coming in, but feel free to keep asking questions, everyone. Suppose I'll start with a question that I have after you guys have all spoken. In terms of the customer in these organizations that you worked in, did you feel as though the customer relationship was owned by sales, and like that was sort of part of the problem? Because what I've experienced in the past is like, often the product team is interfacing with sales or customer success, customer service, but they're not speaking actually to the customer, and that's because that relationship is really tightly held. And sometimes when you unshackle that and break that, then maybe things start to move in the right direction. Did you guys find anything similar? And who owned the relationship with the customer in some of your organizations?
I can talk to that. I would say that I've been in a few enterprise roles, where you have key account managers or major accounts looking after the customer relationship. And when you're coming in, especially coming in new to that company and they don't know you, there is this element of trust and concern a lot of the times from the people, because they feel like they have that ownership, and everything that happens with their account, they feel like they're responsible for it. So yeah, there is that challenge coming into a company. But what I found works really well is I've always invited the salespeople to come with me when I first meet with their customers, and really reassure them that, I'm not there to sell them anything or make any commitments. I'm there to listen. And I think that's what, like Stefan said, like always be listening. We're only there to listen to the customer and their experience.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, I would just add that I think telling them that you're listening is one thing. I think the other thing is sales, marketing, or whoever else in terms of stakeholders you're engaging with, what they're going to get out of the potential listening that you're going to do. So a huge part I find is like getting them on side with the fact that by listening to their problems, we can actually potentially build things and have their clients be the first ones to experience it, because salespeople sometimes have the best insights into the frustrations of, because they're the ones that get the calls. So anything that reduces their friction, they're usually really excited for. I would also say that sometimes we talk about clients as like one term, or potential customers as one term, but I find particularly in enterprise level sales or B2B sales, there's so many people within the client that you are sometimes talking to one person who may be the decision maker, but the person that uses the product is a totally different group. So when you talk to the account manager or get sales involved with the talking to a client, it's also really important to understand the client's context of who you actually should be engaging with, because it's usually not just one person, it's usually more than one person.
Yeah, this is good. It's interesting. I think that sales is definitely on the front line of customer feedback along with customer success. The only problem with that is that sales doesn't synthesize what they're hearing. They like the customer will say, we need feature X, and they'll just tell you we need feature X. They don't ask the why, the 5 whys, right? So, and this is especially true with like enterprise sales, where, I mean, the sales team basically dictates the roadmap in many respects, right? I mean, when you have big contracts, your whole company's dependent on 3 clients, it matters a lot. With B2C though, I think it's your job in product to listen to sales, but listen to what they're not saying and really just get on the phone yourselves, and so you can really understand what the real pain point is, the real need, as opposed to taking sales as words for a feature request verbatim.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I think the underlying theme of what you all said was something that I just took a note on, is like understanding what's in it for them. Like if you can sort of make them understand, like by bringing product along, like what's in it for you, then you might be able to turn the relationship and also get into more of those sessions with the customer. We had a question here for you, Stefan, but I think to all of you. It says, how have you helped your organization see the light, in inverted commas, when it's not been the norm of how they operate? And I think it's been talking about, sales. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, organizations are much less prone to wanting change than your customers are. Organizations are slower to move than your customers are demanding. So to succeed, as a product manager, you have to succeed as change manager. And change is first and foremost about telling a story, a narrative. The way you communicate is so important, and the way you decide to tell those stories will end up, making you more successful. So I would say, tell a story, be an evangelist, demonstrate the benefits of change with data. Data is your friend. Data is also your backstop when you need it, and your wingman, if you will. And make all of that visible. Get people on your side. Take people along with you on your journey. When you're making a change, start small. Work with 1 or 2 people at the company or one team that has aligned incentives, and then branch out from there to people with different disciplines. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's just about telling a story and helping change the narrative within your company.
Any of you guys have anything else to add? Or?
I think it also goes to like the mission of the company. Like the more you can tie yourself to the bigger and broader goal. So not every company is going to be totally product led. For example, I was talking to a consulting company yesterday morning and they are looking at launching a product. They're not going to overnight become a product-led organization. They do managed services and consulting, but they want to take on some of those product aspects. So how, when they tell the story of the product, they have to connect that product to the goals of the consulting organization. So I think it's how do you tie what you're doing in product to whatever that organizational goal and mission is.
Yeah, I've had situations, I agree with all that. I've had situations where, it's not been in the company's DNA. Maybe they've said like, no, we don't do things this way. Where, I've gone and done it anyway, and then I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission sometimes. Now, hopefully you get something really valuable out of it. If you take that risk to do that, you should be pretty sure that the risk that you're taking on is worth the payoff as well, so that you can come back with something really valuable to show them that.
I would also recommend and encourage people to start, programs within the company that encourage like entrepreneurship, right? Because those good ideas can come from anywhere. And a lot of large companies don't have a process for, creating those serendipitous conditions that allow innovation to flourish. And if you're not getting it from up above, if it's not happening at the company, at the management level, you in product have to be the one to start that. So that can be as simple as creating like a Slack channel that's, for everyone to give cool ideas or random ideas. It can be creating a hackathon, anything in between. But if you're not getting that and that's not baked into the company culture, no one else is going to drive it. Like, that's on you. You have to do it.
Yeah. I think the only thing I would add is also finding quick wins. So if you're going to take those risks, like find small ways that you can show an impact, and then you can use that as the story that you start telling to take those bigger risks and to take it to management to get the buy-in to go bigger.
Yeah, that's very good.
I also like the data point that you made, because is like, if revenue is increasing and you're being salespeople, then it continues to increase, and no one's having a look at the underlying data, like what's happening to your cost of acquisition, what's your lifetime value of customers, and often that data is just like not even spoken about, and it requires someone to surface that data in a carefully crafted way, not to like name and shame, but yeah, sometimes that sort of helps really drive the change as well.
Yeah. On that note, real quick, like the biggest leading indicator data you can find is like that qualitative, like NPS stuff, because that you're gonna see, if you see something happening with NPS scores changing and comments, like you will see it in the financials 4 or 5 months later. So that's like a cheat code to getting ahead of problems before they become problems.
Yeah, really good point. I got a couple of other questions here, and I know Hillary mentioned around the mission. One of the questions is actually around that. It talks about your thoughts on balancing the product vision versus product feedback. Notice that going all in on either side hasn't been too successful. What are your past successes on hitting the balance between both? To any of you.
I mean, it depends on the size of the company to some degree, but vision should come from above, right? Like, depending on the size of the company, I mean, the vision tends to come from above, unless you're the founder. Like, it comes from up above, and it should be continuously reviewed. And that's, I think, your job is in product, is to continuously review the vision and develop goals and use those goals to drive the roadmap. I think feedback can help steer vision, but it takes time. I mean, feedback can help steer goals and create new goals. But for feedback to directly impact the vision, it feels like a bit of a stretch to me. It feels like pushing a big rock uphill. I think over time it happens, but I'm not sure about the direct relationship between feedback and vision.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. The way that I usually use feedback in terms is more at the roadmap and the strategy level for the product, where you want to find out what are the overarching themes and what are the different pain points relating to those themes. The vision is another step above that. So yeah, I would agree in saying that it's hard to relate that. It's like saying someone, well, no, that's, you know, your company's reason to exist is incorrect. Is that feedback worth acting on? Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that stage of the company maybe plays a factor in some of this, because if you're very early on, maybe the product vision hasn't been set as firmly. But I view product vision as, you know, one layer, and then you're right, what you're actually doing against it, but then setting those goals or hypothesis, and then using feedback to essentially validate whether the steps you're taking in your priorities are essentially achieving that or not. So if you think you need to go in a certain direction, what should the feedback be from it? What should the level of adoption be towards that? And if that's not happening, then that can kind of feedback, but it probably won't change the actual vision of the whole company. But maybe it will help with the roadmap for what you do next.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that the vision's sort of at the top, right? Like hopefully that's strong and rarely ever changing, and how you get to that vision via your strategy and your tactics, those things might change through feedback. Hopefully the strategy not too much, but that may change as well. But you're definitely taking that feedback, building it into your, the tactics that you're taking and influencing your strategies. It's how it needs to be done. We've got a couple more questions here as well. I had one question which I was going to ask you guys, and I'm just seeing if I have enough time for that as well. I'm interested to know, in terms of if you take a company to be 10 people, what is your experience on the split of that 10 people in terms of product, sales, marketing? It doesn't have to be exact 1.25 people, just broadly, what do you think, what have you found, and where do you think it's worked well? I know it's always going to be a depends. Product manager is always going to say depends on this, depends on that, but just so broadly, it'd be good to get some insight.
I mean, in the spirit of what not to do, I can say it does depend. You're absolutely right. But I think there's no right answer, but the wrong answer is you absolutely do not hire sales and marketing engine until you have product market fit. And it sounds obvious, but I have seen this happen at companies where they get a little bit of fit and they turn up the juice and you just flood the engine. It does not sustain. So that's what not to do. I don't know what the right answer is, but that's the wrong one.
Oh, that's good. Hillary, Tobias?
Yeah, I think I've worked at hardware and software companies as well as just software. So that somewhat plays into it, and the audience of your customer can play into it. So at Black, we don't have as much designers because it's more of an API play. So the ratio of some of the people wouldn't make as much sense as if you have a software where some of the other aspects are more important. So it does depend. I agree. that doubling down on sales very early is just a recipe for disaster. Yeah, so it does depend, but I think you need usually the product person either has to really understand the space really well, or the founder does, or there has to be someone who can really own the need and really represent that in there. So I think that's very clear. And then somebody who can be accountable for actually driving the technology and the actual getting it to market, or hardware, whatever, whoever that kind of is fulfilling that role would be the two most important groups of people in the beginning.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've mostly been in a bit established and larger organizations as well. So there's already like an established, already been an established mix in a lot of them. And I'd say, yeah, I'm going to say what you said we shouldn't do. Is like, yeah, it depends. But if you look at some of the type of product that you're selling as well. So if it's a highly complex product, perhaps, you need to actually have someone to take on that role and act as the salesperson or the business development person to go out there and try to explain the value of your product.
Yeah, most definitely. We have a point here on storytelling, and I think it's a really important point. I think Stefan mentioned it as well. And the question is really just asking if anyone could share some of their success stories on how they managed to influence change and what the critical factor in the storytelling was, like the point at which maybe something changed, or yeah.
I can think of one if you want me to.
Yeah, go for it.
So one company I worked at was in the dental industry. It's a very niche product, and they were really heavily invested when I joined in inventory management. And I very quickly realized that it's a really hard push because it required people to download their phone and then actually physically scan items and to manually scan the barcode, then say what the barcode was. So it was a really hard and painful system. And dental offices, are very busy with everything else. So you're also asking people that don't care that much about the clinic's outcomes to spend a lot of additional time doing work effort. So unfortunately, they probably hadn't established the product market fit prior to joining, which was concerning. And so it became very clear to me that there needed to be a pivot on the roadmap. And I was really lucky that I was able to help them pivot towards focusing a higher amount in terms of a marketplace play where you're doing group buying. So it's now the largest dental group buying group in Canada across, I think it's now 6 or 7 provinces. So that was a really hard one, and I make it sound really easy, but it was definitely very hard to take the founder, who was an oral surgeon and really believed that every dental assistant was going to spend time scanning every product before their patient and after their patient visits, to understanding that a much easier and less frictionless and higher adoption is with getting people to have a Amazon-like shopping experience. And that took a lot of a change of investment and change of strategy. And so part of getting that point across was definitely data in terms of going through the numbers, what our churn rates actually were, because they hadn't done a lot of that analysis to understand the actual numbers, but then also trying to use the data and the trends that were happening on the opportunity, like trying to quantify and business case what it could be and how we could easily try or confirm to get there. And that's part of it. And in our case, we found a partner, like the first state organization to like make a partnership, which would justify the investment to get to that, to actually make substantial strides towards that pivot.
It's really good.
I hope that I tried to summarize it
Yeah,
really briefly, but of course I'm leaving out a lot of challenges and crisis points along the way, but hopefully that gives you an idea of a pivot.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's an amazing story. I think that story probably needs its own session, probably. So,
Yeah,
thank you for that. I think we've actually run a little bit over. I thank all of you guys, Hillary, Stefan, Tobias, thank you all for joining us. Sammy, great job once again organizing the topic. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. I think one thing that I've definitely taken out of this is, there's a few questions here actually about how we can convince sales and marketing to work closer. And I think, data tells a story, but also, what's in it for them. There's also a lot of great practices that product managers bring in terms of, workshopping that maybe the sales team can really leverage that, that skill. So I would definitely not be afraid of like putting your hand up and running some of that stuff for them, because that will also be of value to the sales team and can help break down those barriers. Thank you all, and happy Friday and happy weekend. We'll speak to you all very soon. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.
Have a lovely weekend.
Good weekend.